Early morning at the home of a wealthy family in the village, dozens of people were bustling, working nonstop. Some were already drenched in sweat, but no one dared to rest. In the courtyard, a tent had been erected, covered with a tarp to shield from the sun. Many people sat gathered around several round tables, chatting. The elders sat with other elders, while the younger ones sat with their peers. They talked about various things, but Xiao Zhang's gaze was fixed on a young man who lived in this house. At a nearby table, a middle-aged man spoke with a sorrowful voice to those sitting with him. "That son of his, it was too sudden, wasn't it, sir? Just a few days ago, he passed my house and greeted me, and today he's dead." He shook his head. "When I heard the news in the middle of the night, I was shaken for a while." The man next to him clicked his tongue. "My goodness, I didn't know anything either, ma'am. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, while sleeping, I heard a commotion. I said something was wrong, and I heard he had crawled all the way back home before he died. From then until now, with all the chaotic shouting and wailing, it's hard to tell what's true, isn't it?" Another person chimed in, his voice resolute. "That's right, sir. My house is the closest to his, and at that very moment, I don't know why, but I woke up to pee right when the young man was crawling home." Another person eagerly asked, "And then what, sir? Please tell us what happened." The man nodded, recalling the events of the previous night. "Honestly, I don't know much because everyone knows what his family is like, and we usually don't want to bother too much. Sometimes it just causes trouble. Anyway, last night I really had to pee, so I got up to use the restroom. I was standing in the backyard when I heard knocking on the gate, very strong knocking. It was as if someone was putting all their strength into it. At that moment, I didn't know his son was crawling home, all bloody and battered. But just hearing that sound, I knew immediately something was wrong. No one knocks on a gate like that in the middle of the night. To be honest, even though his family might have displeased some people, it's not to the point where someone would come to their house in the middle of the night looking for trouble." He paused here, looked around, swallowed, and continued, "When I heard that at first, I didn't want to pay much attention, thinking it was other people's business. But for some reason, the knocking on the gate kept ringing out and no one opened it. I didn't hear anyone speaking. So I got curious. I went out to open the gate and peeked over to see what was happening. As soon as I looked, I saw someone slumped by the gate, looking terribly frightening. But from a distance, it wasn't clear. When I ran over to see who it was, someone was already at the gate. That day, or more precisely, Ruan, Mr. Lai's son, immediately collapsed. Then, the people inside the house rushed out, and the young man was carried into the house. After that, everyone in the village heard the news that Ruan had died. That's how it is now. But the reason for his death is still unclear." Someone listening clicked their tongue and said, "It's true then. All this time, I've been hearing people talk with all sorts of confusing information, not knowing what to believe. Now that I hear you, sir, I believe it. But why did Ruan suddenly die like that? Just out of nowhere, he came crawling back in the middle of the night, covered in blood, and then collapsed and died. Just hearing about it makes me feel disgusted." The eldest man present said, "Well, you all know already, but no one wants to say it. If it were said aloud, everyone would know what kind of person Ruan was. Many times, he angered people, being a son who spent all his days eating, playing, and wandering, born into a wealthy family, spending money without a thought, and getting into serious trouble. I suspect he went out drinking and got into a fight, perhaps with some dangerous people, which is why they beat him to death. Perhaps there will be more information about this soon." The whole group nodded, as his words seemed true. Ruan had long been known as a pampered young master from a powerful family, and as an only son, his parents spoiled him terribly. With their wealth, it was common for him to develop bad habits, spending all his money on pleasure and then asking his parents for more. His comfortable life continued like this until today, when he turned 20. Some expressed sorrow for Ruan, who had left this world too young, but not a few secretly uttered words of contempt. The idea that this young man went out causing trouble and was beaten to death was probably not just the opinion of that one man. Indeed, as recounted, in the middle of the night, Mr. Lai's entire family was sound asleep when there was a thunderous knocking at the gate. The family, being in business, had often displeased people. Or to be precise, the villagers generally thought it possible that someone might come to cause trouble at that hour. Initially, not wanting any trouble, Mr. Lai told his servants to just ignore the knocking. The person outside would eventually get tired and leave, no need to engage in tiring conversation. As for Ruan, if he hadn't returned by evening, he certainly wouldn't be back at this hour, so they had carelessly assumed no one would bother them. After all, it had always been that way. But the knocking outside continued relentlessly, as if someone was using all their strength, which made Mr. Lai uncomfortable. "All right, Jiading, go open it and see. I'll give him a piece of my mind for daring to disturb us in the middle of the night." Jiading, following instructions, unlatched the gate. As he was about to open it, a bloody body suddenly collapsed inwards, hitting his head and feet. Jiading was startled, a little panicked as the blood-soaked body pressed against his legs. He stood frozen for a few seconds, then composed himself, bent down to look closely, and reached out to lift the face of the person. He was horrified. "Oh, young master, everyone, help me. Something has happened to the young master." Mr. Lai and his family, woken by the commotion, stood inside the house, annoyed that some unruly person was causing trouble in the middle of the night. However, as soon as they heard the servant's voice, they froze, their bodies trembling, faces paling as they rushed outside in a panic. Upon arrival, Mr. Lai saw his only son lying in a heap on the ground, covered in blood. He froze, staring blankly at the body, unable to utter a single word. In contrast, Mrs. Lai, seeing her son lying in a pool of blood, his breath weak, felt her soul fly away. She shrieked loudly. "Oh no, my son, what happened to my son?" She turned to the servants, yelling through tears. "Why are you all just standing there? Get him inside, quickly." The servants, after a moment of shock at seeing the young master's condition, recovered themselves after Mrs. Lai's scream and helped carry him into the house. Mr. Lai immediately commanded, "Go quickly and call Master Moan." Before anyone could leave, the person examining the young man's wounds spoke with a trembling voice. "The young master, he's gone." Mr. Lai, who had been standing firm, stumbled backward. For him, this precious son, despite all his wildness and the money he squandered, was still his own flesh and blood. It was only because he and his wife had indulged him excessively that he had become so spoiled. The couple had only one child, and Mr. Lai himself was an only son of the Lai family. No one knew why, but this family had only ever given birth to one child for generations, and it was always a son. The locals even rumored that this tradition was what had made the Lai family so wealthy and powerful. People say, no one is as rich as them, no one stays poor for 3 generations. But for the Lai family, it was different. The entire lineage had been extremely wealthy for generations, and notably, there was always only one male heir. Even in the time of men with 5 or 7 concubines, the Lai family would try to marry many wives, but only one wife would ever bear a child, and it would always be a son. The other wives, no matter what, could not have children, let alone sons or daughters. This is why Ruan's death left Mr. Lai in such profound despair, largely because Ruan was his son and the sole heir to the Lai family lineage. He needed to know who was responsible for this, yet he understood better than anyone else the implications. He might be the last generation of the Lai family. It was possible that their family line would end here. He was already old, and having another child was no easy feat. This possibility was definitely out of the question. Seeing his extreme confusion, which multiplied his pain many times over, he gritted his teeth. "All right, whoever killed my son, I will make sure you pay for it." His anger gradually subsided. By late morning, Master Moan, whom the Lai family frequently invited, also arrived. Master Moan's house was quite far away, which was why he only now made an appearance. As he stepped into the courtyard, the shaman glanced around with a strange look in his eye, a hint of malevolence flickering within his gaze before he greeted the family. "Forgive me, I was in a hurry, so I arrived late." Master Moan discreetly eyed Mr. Lai, quickly discerning the profound sorrow in the homeowner's mournful eyes. This somber grief stemmed not only from his son's sudden death, but also from a deeper, hidden pain. Seeing that Master Moan had arrived, Mr. Lai tried to push aside his sorrow. He stepped forward to greet him. "You're here, Master Moan, my boy. He died so unjustly." Master Moan replied, "First, you must calm down. I will do my best to take care of the young man completely." The family must maintain their composure for things to work out. Mr. Lai was deeply touched by every word Master Moan spoke. The family had a long tradition of frequently inviting shamans, generation after generation. When one shaman passed away, they would diligently seek out another, more powerful one. This made their business ventures prosperous. Consequently, they often sabotaged others' livelihoods, causing the villagers, though not openly hostile, to secretly understand why their own businesses never truly thrived. Master Moan had been supported by the Lai family for a long time, at least several decades. Since then, the two parties had lived in a symbiotic relationship. The Lai family prospered thanks to Master Moan, while Master Moan received extremely generous treatment, earning a fortune from this household. It was rumored that he performed rituals exclusively for the Lai family. Because of this long-standing profitable relationship, the Lai family trusted Master Moan implicitly. They spared no expense, sometimes even giving Master Moan a sum of money that outsiders could only dream of acquiring in a lifetime, all for a very small service to the Lai family. This close relationship even made people feel as if Master Moan and the Lai family were one household. Today, hearing Master Moan's comforting words, Mr. Lai was deeply moved, almost to tears. He said, "My family thanks you very much, Master Moan. Please come inside and have some water to regain your strength. You must be very tired from such a long journey. Rest a little before starting the work." Master Moan nodded and replied, "All right, I only need to burn 1/3 of an incense stick. The preparations have been long overdue." Mr. Lai was even more touched. After lighting 1/3 of the incense stick, Master Moan stood up and directed everyone to prepare for the ritual. He meticulously performed each step of the ceremony with great devotion, making everyone quietly whisper among themselves. Indeed, with money, you get a proper, thorough job done, unlike other shamans who sometimes just finish the job, take the money, and leave. Oh, you're exaggerating. As far as I know, there are many devoted shamans out there. It's just that their spiritual power isn't enough for this family to rely on. Or perhaps, many people don't want to get involved with this family, so let's just assume that. But what I said isn't wrong. His meticulousness in every action during the work is surely partly due to the generous payment. Several villagers buzzed among themselves while Master Moan continued preparing Ruan's burial shroud. Ruan's death was somewhat complicated. If it were anyone else, people would dare to report it to the authorities to seek justice. But Mr. Lai decided otherwise, believing that with his own resources, he could track down those responsible and make them pay a heavy price. Since even the deceased's family didn't want to stir up trouble, no one bothered with Ruan's death. They decided to perform the anointing ritual and chose a time for a swift burial. Everyone simply followed along, and no one raised any objections. A day after Ruan's funeral, Master Moan was invited to stay and help with a few more things. He hadn't planned to stay, but he also didn't mind. That evening, after the work was done, Mr. Lai sat down, sighing sadly as he spoke to Master Moan. "My son's fate is too bitter, Master Moan. He left so suddenly, and he was our only child. Now that he's gone, it feels like I've died inside. I don't know what to do." As if understanding Mr. Lai's profound sorrow, Master Moan gently said, "I understand your family is suffering greatly from this. If my own child died, I would feel the same pain. Yes, our family is deeply grateful to you, Master Moan, but truly, whatever we say now, it cannot bring him back. The young man is gone, and our family has no one left." Master Moan sighed and interjected, "It's about the lineage, isn't it?" "Yes, Master Moan. Our family is truly troubled by this. You know, our family has only ever had one child per generation, and it's always been a son. We could never have a second child. Yet, for generations, our family has prospered without any trouble. Truth be told, we've inadvertently wronged others many times, creating a lot of karma, but it's not so heavy that we should face the complete extinction of our line today. You can see how much pain I'm in, can't you, Master Moan? My son is gone, and our family has no one to continue the lineage. I am old now, and even if I were younger, who's to say I could have another child? I'm so sad. If things continue like this, I will surely be the last of the Lai family." After saying this, Mr. Lai wept uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face. Mrs. Lai rushed to his side to comfort him. "Calm down, dear. This might be a bit embarrassing to say, but I've heard rumors. Our son, when he was out playing, didn't often associate with girls. Do you understand what I mean?" Mr. Lai had always been sharp and efficient in his business throughout his life, but today, perhaps the headache from his son's death clouded his mind. He looked blankly and asked, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." Master Moan also seemed not to understand what Mrs. Lai meant. She glanced nervously from side to side, then lowered her voice to the quietest whisper for the two men to hear. "Well, some time ago, I heard rumors that Ruan, when he was out playing, misbehaved with other people's daughters, several of whom were still virgins, just to satisfy himself. And you know our son's nature. He indulged in pleasures without ever thinking of the consequences. Didn't you have to quietly clean up his messes many times? Mr. Lai swallowed. He was beginning to understand his wife's meaning and continued. At the time I heard it, I didn't believe it because I truly didn't wish for such a thing to happen. If he had done something wrong elsewhere, and then some family came here to demand compensation, we would die of shame. But now, with the current situation, I suddenly remember that story, and honestly, I hope it's true. If it is, then we could have a grandchild and wouldn't have to worry anymore. Mr. Lai's face lit up with a golden gleam of hope, but he was still skeptical, unsure if such a possibility existed. Mrs. Lai then continued, "Right now, that's our only hope. What else can we do? Anyway, we'll have to find out if any of the girls he was involved with carried his child." Mrs. Lai's words made sense, yet Mr. Lai was still filled with worries. He said, "What you say might not be impossible, but let's assume there is such a child. Given how wild our son was, causing harm to so many girls, if he really did leave behind his bloodline, would those families agree to let us acknowledge the child? They might even say we're only reaching out now because we're desperate. At that point, it would be even more humiliating, and where would we hide our faces?" Mrs. Lai thought for a moment, then spoke. "The important thing is to find them first. If it's true, we'll try to humble ourselves. At most, we'll offer them some money. I don't think they'd refuse. After all, it's our grandchild, and if we're completely sincere, that should be enough. I don't think their family would want their grandchild to be born without a father. Since his father is gone, at least their daughter would have a proper standing. You just need to say the right words to bring the girl back and treat her well." It must be said that Mrs. Lai had lived with her husband for many years, so she understood his character. Towards outsiders, they might not always be pleasant, but if someone could bring benefit to their family and lineage, they would spare no effort to forge a connection. Mr. Lai was increasingly persuaded by his wife, but still hesitated to make a decision. But even if that family agrees, would they truly respect us? In business, reputation is paramount, and people will talk. Perhaps we could tell them that we had already agreed to let the two get married early on. Before that could happen, something happened to our son. The girl, out of love for her husband, still wishes to come to our home as a daughter-in-law. That would solve it. There's nothing for you to worry about," Mrs. Lai interjected. Mr. Lai was now completely convinced by his wife. He said, "I'll send people to investigate. We must find out if that's true." A last glimmer of hope had appeared. The couple was deeply engrossed, so happy that they didn't notice Master Moan shaking his head and sighing. He spoke, "I don't think you two need to do that." Hearing Master Moan's unexpected words, both Mr. and Mrs. Lai froze, their faces turning blank, eyes wide with confusion. Mr. Lai stammered, "Master Moan, what do you mean? This situation might be difficult, but it's our family's last hope. Master Moan, why do you say we don't need to?" Master Moan clicked his tongue, his voice tinged with sadness. "Let me tell you this. Whether you believe it or not, I truly heard what the mistress of the house said, and I didn't rule out this possibility. So I cast a divination and calculated your son's birth chart. Unfortunately, what the mistress said is not true. I couldn't find a single trace of the young man's bloodline left behind." Upon hearing this, the couple's minds became clouded, and tears streamed down their faces as their only hope was crushed. Whose words could they not believe? But coming from Master Moan, they both thought, why would he lie to them? They stood frozen in despair. Mrs. Lai gasped, coming to herself, her legs unsteady, tears soaking her cheeks. Mr. Lai remained seated with Master Moan. He was beyond understanding anything now, just sitting in silence. Master Moan also said nothing, quietly sipping his tea. Mr. Lai showed signs of regaining his composure. "Oh dear, I apologize, Master Moan. I was so grief-stricken earlier. I hope you don't mind." Master Moan took another sip of tea, looked at Mr. Lai with a meaningful gaze, and then said, "I haven't finished speaking yet. Why are you two so quick to jump to conclusions?" Startled, Mr. Lai looked intently at Master Moan, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear, hope, and trembling anticipation. "What do you mean, Master Moan? Does this mean our family still has hope?" Master Moan stopped drinking tea, placed the cup on the table, and fixed Mr. Lai with a deep, hidden gaze. "If I say it is true, how would you, master of this house, feel?" As soon as Mr. Lai heard this, he immediately knelt before Master Moan, his voice pleading. It was a sight no villager would ever dream of seeing in their lifetime, the proud Mr. Lai kneeling before someone. He spoke tearfully, his voice choked. "If you have a way, Master Moan, please guide us. I will forever be grateful to you. Please help our family." Master Moan bent down to help Mr. Lai up. Master of this house, please stand. There's no need for this. I have already implied that I will definitely help. There's no need to beg. Mr. Lai continued to bow his head. Oh, if that's the case, I am so grateful to you, Master Moan, so very grateful. Master Moan helped him up, then calmly said, however, for this matter to succeed, your family must accept one condition. Anything, Master Moan. As long as there's a chance to save this lineage, I am willing to sacrifice my old life. Master Moan merely smiled faintly, a deep, enigmatic smile that was hard to discern. Mr. Lai, unable to see this smile, pleaded desperately like a drowning man grasping at a log. Master Moan, if you have a way, please save our family. I will endure anything. Master Moan glanced around, helped the homeowner up, then leaned close and whispered to him, if you want to have a child, you must exhume the young master's grave. After that, Master Moan murmured to Mr. Lai. As he spoke, Mr. Lai's face turned pale. In an instant, he became ashen, drained of all color. For him, it was too terrifying, beyond the imagination of a normal person. His lips trembled, stammering incoherently. Must we do that, Master Moan? Yes, that is the only way. The decision rests with your family. If you agree, the fewer people who know about this, the better, to prevent it from getting out. Master Moan, now confident in his plan, expected Mr. Lai to agree, but was surprised when Mr. Lai nodded without a moment's hesitation. If that is the case, my family will follow your instructions. Excellent. Master Moan then continued. Since you have agreed, listen carefully to my instructions. This must be done as soon as possible. After a long explanation, Master Moan thoroughly instructed Mr. Lai, not forgetting to emphasize, remember very carefully, you must find people with those specific birth charts. They must be strong, but the fewer in number the better, and they must be trustworthy. Only then will the ritual succeed, and the secret will not get out. Mr. Lai replied firmly, rest assured, Master Moan, our family will certainly take care of everything completely, as soon as possible, and without any mistakes. After saying this, he left the room with eyes full of anticipation and longing. He never suspected that his decision was a grave mistake. A mistake that, even just once, would suffice to incur immense consequences. 3 days later, after all the arrangements were made, Master Moan also sought permission to leave. Mr. Lai, looking drained, personally escorted the master all the way home. Before Master Moan departed, the two exchanged a meaningful look without a word. After Master Moan left, the family members returned inside and resumed their normal lives. That day, everything seemed ordinary, but the gloomy sorrow over Ruan's death still enveloped Mrs. Lai, preventing her from escaping her grief. Mrs. Lai grew increasingly listless, spending her days lying idle in her room. For Mr. Lai, however, that sorrow was merely superficial. In his heart, he was filled with hope, wishing that Master Moan's words would come true. As night fell, bringing with it a chilling atmosphere, the darkness enveloped the house, which was still permeated by the fading scent of funeral incense. If the mood was already dismal and suffocating when everyone was awake, it was even more somber now. Outside the rather spacious house, only a few servants remained, finishing up their tasks before retiring. Mr. and Mrs. Lai had gone to bed, exhausted and disheartened from the long day. Mrs. Lai, too consumed by sorrow, had moved to a different room tonight instead of sleeping beside her husband as usual. Her son's death had deeply saddened her. Even though Ruan had been a prodigal son, living a life of endless indulgence, she no longer cared if the family lineage would end. Her only concern now was that her son had died a painful and complicated death. Yet, her husband remained unfazed, refusing to take any action. Just 3 days after her son's death, Mrs. Lai missed him terribly. Every night she longed to see her son, even if only in dreams, but she could never. All her dreams were filled with pain, and she remembered nothing upon waking. Today, during the day, it had been quite hot, so Mrs. Lai had opened the window for ventilation in her room. But by night, she was utterly desolate. The weather had turned cold. Yet, she didn't care and left the window wide open. She didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to eat. She just lay there all day until night, wishing she could dream of her son. But she couldn't sleep, tossing and turning all day. Tonight, as the cold descended, Mrs. Lai lay still, her back turned towards the window. Cold gusts of wind blew in, chilling her body as she wore only a thin nightgown. Still, she remained motionless, indifferent to everything. She didn't bother pulling up her blanket for warmth. She just closed her eyes, wanting to sink into sleep. Only then could she meet her son, even though Ruan was gone. As she drifted into sleep just as she hoped, Mrs. Lai suddenly flinched, her eyes wide open, when she heard a thud inside the room. She opened her eyes, lay still, silently listening to see if there were any other sounds, but there was nothing. The room was deathly quiet, not a sound. The sleep she had longed for all day was interrupted, making her visibly irritated. Her face was contorted, expressing profound discomfort and pain. She had struggled to fall asleep, only to be suddenly wide awake. Mrs. Lai was furious, her eyes burning. After a fit of annoyance, she tried to close her eyes again to sleep, but as soon as she closed her eyes, she heard a strange sound in both ears. It wasn't the thudding sound from earlier, but a hushed voice, a non-human voice calling her. "Mother, mother." She opened her eyes abruptly, sat up, and looked around the pitch-dark room. She felt a little scared because someone was calling her in the middle of the night. She hadn't yet recognized whose voice it was. She looked around the room, saw no one, then whispered, "Who called me?" She had just heard herself being called, but now when she asked, no one answered. She murmured, "Who's calling me like that?" Looking around, seeing no one, and with no reply, Mrs. Lai thought that maybe some of the servants outside were calling each other, and she, missing her son too much, had simply misheard. She exhaled and lay down, turning towards the window. Mrs. Lai had forgotten that she hadn't checked the area outside the window, where a shadowy figure was lurking. Mrs. Lai, just as she lay down before she could compose herself, she heard someone calling again. This time, there was no mistaking it because she clearly heard the voice calling "Mother" close by, a deep, ethereal, echoing voice. This time, she was certain she hadn't misheard. The two words she had just heard were "mother." She couldn't clearly identify the voice, but if someone was calling "mother," who else could it be but Ruan, her only child? Immediately, she wanted to call out to her son, but her voice caught in her throat, unable to escape. Unable to speak, Mrs. Lai tried to look around her dark room. There was no one. Absolutely no one else was present in this room besides her. Mrs. Lai searched in vain. She waited for the voice to call out again, but she searched and waited and heard nothing more. Deeply disappointed, Mrs. Lai sat frozen in place, wanting to cry out, "My son, where are you?" But the sound was choked in her throat. As she was whimpering, she suddenly stopped, her eyes widening in terror because behind her by the window there was a chilling sensation, cold as if cutting her flesh, spreading to her neck. She slowly turned her face, her eyes filled with immense fear, even though she knew there was a possibility that a spirit was standing behind her. Outside the window, it was Ruan, her son. No matter what in her heart, Mrs. Lai had accepted that her son was truly dead because the evidence was too clear. Ruan's body had been buried 3 days prior. Therefore, even though she longed to see her son, she now felt incredibly afraid. She was scared that when she turned around, she would see something truly horrifying, not Ruan. Despite her fear, she still wanted to turn and see what it was, whether it was truly terrifying or not. As she turned her head, Mrs. Lai, horrified, used all her concentration, bracing her hands and pulling herself back. Just a little further, and she would have fallen off the bed. Mrs. Lai looked with fearful eyes towards the window frame, her face contorted in a grimace because there, silhouetted against the night, was the dark figure of a young man, his hands gripping the window frame. By now, she was so scared that her mouth could only make gurgling sounds, unable to form words. Her face turned pale, completely drained of blood. Suddenly, in her ear, an echoing voice spoke again. "Mother, mother!" It was the same voice calling "mother" from earlier. The only difference was that Mrs. Lai recognized it was coming from that shadowy figure. Those sounds reverberated in her head, not coming from outside as usual. The cold, mournful voice rang out. It took Mrs. Lai a while to swallow and calm down. What was outside the window became clear. Only then did she see that the person standing outside the window was Ruan. She tried to open her mouth to call her son, but her voice was stuck. Her eyes no longer showed fear. When she recognized it was her son, her expression shifted to one of profound pain, her eyes conveying her yearning. She had longed for this moment to see her son through a dream, hoping against hope, and now she could finally see him. But she asserted that this was not a dream. At this moment, she was fully awake, extremely alert, and Ruan was standing there, right outside the window. He was holding onto the window frame, gazing sadly inside. He called out, "Mother." Mrs. Lai was so happy to see her son that she was no longer afraid. She wanted to call him inside and run to hold his hand. But her entire body was stiff, unable to move. Outside the window, Ruan still stood silently, saying nothing, not calling "Mother." He just looked at her with resentful eyes, then moved to one side, turned, and pointed his hand into the distance as if trying to indicate something to her. However, Mrs. Lai didn't understand. In her ears, she heard another voice, still calling, "Mother," but longer this time. "Mother, I'm dead. My death was so painful. Save me?" Mrs. Lai heard these words and tried her utmost to ask what was wrong with her son, but she couldn't. After speaking, Ruan no longer looked at her. He moved decisively, stepping away from the window and disappearing. After Ruan vanished, Mrs. Lai's body could move normally again. She rushed to the window frame, looking out at where Ruan had just left, utterly distraught. "He's still alive, my son. Why don't you come home? Why are you out there in the cold? Mother misses you so much. Come in, my son." Unable to call her son back from inside the room, Mrs. Lai frantically ran out of the room, searching everywhere, calling out tearfully. The servants, having just finished their duties and preparing to rest, heard their mistress's frantic screams and rushed out in a panic. Mr. Lai also quickly awoke. "What's going on with you all?" The servants, like Mr. Lai, didn't know what was happening. They all ran to Mrs. Lai's side, shaking their heads. "We don't know, sir. We were just about to rest when we heard the mistress screaming out here. Quickly, hold her back, don't let her run off." Mr. Lai hurriedly instructed the servants to restrain Mrs. Lai. Outside, the neighboring houses also heard the commotion and woke up, wondering what was happening. "Why are they screaming so late at night?" A wife from a nearby house replied. "It sounds like Mrs. Lai. It's too far to hear clearly, but it sounds like she's calling for her son." As she said this, the woman shivered slightly, feeling a chill run down her spine. The incident in the Lai family's house in the middle of the night, how could they not be afraid? With Ruan's recent death and Mrs. Lai waking up in the middle of the night calling for her son like that? The husband, listening, nodded and sighed. She must miss her son too much, that's why she's like that. In the end, it's heartbreaking. We are also parents, and even if we don't think much of that family, in such circumstances, who wouldn't feel pain and sorrow? You're right. It's true that their family isn't well liked around here, but they are still parents and child, flesh and blood. Who wouldn't feel pain? That son of theirs, when he was alive, was destructive and wild, but he's dead now. Who would still want to blame him? Seeing her like this now, I feel deeply saddened too. The couple sighed, looked at each other, then lay back down to rest, thinking it wasn't their business. They only worried that someone important over there might have screamed so loudly because of a major incident. But it was only Mrs. Lai's voice. Because she missed her son and was calling out, it was probably nothing serious. The neighbors decided to mind their own business, avoiding more trouble or losing face by being nosy. Later, at the Lai family's house, everyone finally managed to restrain Mrs. Lai and bring her back inside. Mr. Lai, tearfully, held his wife. "Wife, what's wrong with you? Calm down." She didn't answer, only struggled to break free from his grasp, screaming for her son. "My son, where are you? Come back to me." Mrs. Lai was elderly and a woman, usually very frail. It was incomprehensible how someone had given her such strength today. Several strong young servants had to use all their might to hold her back. Mrs. Lai continuously struggled, wanting to break free from everyone's hold, her mouth only trying to call for her son. Her son had just died. The people in the house could understand that she was acting this way because she missed her son. However, her calls now sent shivers down everyone's spines. Her wailing in the middle of the night made the servants tremble. Furthermore, the fact that several strong young men had to exert all their strength to hold her back only added to the eerie mystique of this story. Mr. Lai clutched his wife's shoulders and asked, "What's wrong with her? Calm down. Why are you calling the young master's name? He's dead." "Our boy is gone, he's no longer here to be called." Just as Mr. Lai said this, Mrs. Lai fell silent, staring blankly, no longer screaming. It seemed she had processed his words and calmed down, but no. She turned to look at her husband with a dazed expression, then shook her head slowly. "My son isn't dead. My son isn't dead. Calm down, our son truly is dead." He reached out to quickly wipe away his tears. Seeing her like this, how could he not be heartbroken? But then Mrs. Lai spoke again, uttering a sentence that shocked everyone around her. "The young master, he just came back. The young man just came back and stood right outside the window, looking at me. He was just here. Quickly, send people to find him." The servants were utterly shaken to their core upon hearing their mistress's words. The story of the young master's death was clear. His body had even been buried. Yet tonight, in the middle of the night, she was claiming Ruan was alive and had just returned to find his mother. They could understand her missing her son and calling for him, but her insistence that Ruan was alive made everyone's hearts pound and legs tremble. Mr. Lai, hearing his wife, was also deeply shaken for a moment. After a while, he composed himself and nodded. "What are you talking about, dear? Ruan is dead. The funeral is over. How could he come back to find you? You're just missing him too much and dreaming. No, the young man is alive. He was just outside the room looking at me. I didn't miss here. And it wasn't a dream either because I haven't slept a wink all day. Mr. Lai still didn't believe what his wife said, even though he himself didn't want to accept the truth. But Ruan's death was too clear, forcing him to face that reality. He continued to reassure his wife. Don't be like this anymore, dear. If the young man in heaven knew, he would be very sad. You're just missing your son too much and imagining things. Our son is dead now. You have to believe me. Our Ruan is still alive. He's just somewhere. Quickly, send people to find him, dear. The servants grew increasingly frightened. Everyone who looked into her eyes was terrified because her eyes shone with a fierce intensity every time she mentioned her son being alive, as if it were completely true. But everyone knew the young master was dead. How could he come back? And if he did, it would only be a ghost. At that point, several servants, having no further tasks, took each other's hands and retreated to their rooms. Because listening to Mrs. Lai, they were scared out of their wits. They were afraid that perhaps they themselves hadn't seen the young master return and stand outside the window, as she said. At that moment, their hearts would jump out of their chests from fear. Without a word, many left, no longer searching, leaving only Mr. and Mrs. Lai, along with the young men supporting her. Currently, Mrs. Lai was no longer struggling, allowing them to relax their grip. Mr. Lai sat up. You all take her back to her room to rest, then take turns standing guard outside for me. Tomorrow morning, I'll give you money to spend, no need to worry. Yes, sir, we thank you, sir. It's nothing. If you work diligently, no one will be shortchanged. The men nodded, immediately helping Mrs. Lai back to her private room. Mr. Lai's recent words were absolutely true, and everyone in the house had to admit it. It could be said that his family's business practices often disturbed others, leading to strained relations with their neighbors. However, when it came to their own family and household staff, it was different. If they did well, they were rewarded. If they made mistakes, they were scolded with a few words to learn from. The servants in the house were not actually villagers or people with families outside. They were brought from other places, having extremely difficult circumstances, no one to rely on and no relatives. Plus, the family treated their servants well, so no one among them bore any resentment towards this household. On the contrary, they were very dedicated to their work. For young men helped the mistress back to her room. One of them spoke, "Please rest, ma'am. If you need anything, just call us from outside." Mrs. Lai said nothing, simply got back into bed. The young men immediately left the room and closed the door. They divided themselves as the master had instructed. They formed two groups, with Hewitt and Tan guarding first, while the other two went to rest and would return later. Hewitt and Tan were bored guarding at this hour, so they talked quietly, but not too loud, fearing the mistress in the room would hear and not be able to sleep. Hey, do you think what happened earlier was spooky? Why are you suddenly bringing that up now? You'll scare us to death. The mistress suddenly said the young master came back last night, who wouldn't be scared to death. That's why I said it was unbelievably scary. You don't believe me, but all four of us had to exert all our strength to hold her back, and she's old and just a normal woman. Sometimes, I alone could hold her with one hand. How is she so strong today? In the middle of the night, a chilling breeze blew, and the two young men, curious about what had happened, began to talk. Tan saw Hewitt peering at something and asked, "What are you looking for, man? It's the middle of the night, don't keep looking around for ghosts, you'll scare me to death." "Don't be silly, I'm just checking if anyone's here." Hearing this, Tan shivered, and Hewitt quickly waved his hand. "No, I'm just checking if anyone's here, that's all." "Really? You're not scared?" I clearly saw the mistress's eyes earlier. She kept staring at something as if her son was still alive. I was terrified, I almost ran away. Do you believe what the mistress said? That young Master Ruan is still alive. What if you and I suddenly see him here now and die of a heart attack? They looked around to see if anyone was there, but in fact, they hoped no one else would appear. They didn't notice Tan's face next to them, looking at Hewitt, pale and panicked, as if he was afraid of something. They looked around, saw no one, then turned back, intending to continue talking. But they stopped when they saw Tan staring blankly at Hewitt, not at Hyan. Hewitt knew Tan wasn't looking at Hyan, but at another place. Hewitt turned his head to his left, towards the side of Mrs. Lai's room, which was empty. He turned back and asked, "What's wrong with you? Why are you staring blankly?" "Hey, what's wrong with you?" Tan remained silent, still rigid, staring towards the eastern side of the house. Hewitt thought for a moment and said, "Heavens, this guy Tan, did what I said scare him that much? The mistress just misses her son. There's no way the young master could come back. What is there to be scared of?" Hewitt tried to reassure him because he feared his previous words. However, Tan's expression remained unchanged. Only then did Hewitt feel a pang of unease. "What's wrong, man? Don't joke with me. It's the middle of the night, you idiot." Hewitt suddenly felt afraid when he looked into his friend's eyes, which were filled with such terror as if he had just seen something horrifying. Hewitt insisted, and Tan finally managed to stutter a few words. There's someone by the side of the house." Hewitt didn't understand why Tan was saying this. His face paled and his body began to tremble. It seemed that, as he wished, someone else had appeared besides the two of them. But who could it be, and why was Tan so frightened? Hewitt immediately asked, "Who is it? Is it the young master? How could that be? What are you talking about? No, that can't be the young master." Hewitt, though scared, still didn't believe it. He said, "Really? How could it be? The young master is dead." As he said this, Hewitt's heart pounded even harder with fear, because this was the very reason why they were so terrified. If the young master were alive and here, they wouldn't be scared. But he was dead. And if, as Tan had just said, they saw the young master's figure, they would surely die of a heart attack right there. Tan looked at his friend, composed himself, and then spoke. Do you remember the night the young master was gravely injured and crawled back here?" Hewitt nodded. Tan continued, "I just saw him. He was wearing those same clothes, walking towards the side of the house. It's dark, but I still clearly saw those clothes and his figure." Hewitt was terrified, almost losing his mind when he heard Tan say this. He turned towards the side of the house, trembling with fear. He was afraid he would see what Tan had just described. Fortunately, when he looked in that direction, Hewitt saw nothing. The two men were silent for a while, seeing no one and hearing no frightening sounds. Then Hewitt said, "Hey, why don't we go check it out?" "No, I'm too scared. Don't go." "What are you scared of?" "You probably just misidentified something earlier. If the young master had really returned, he would have scared us senseless by now." Tan was still scared, but his friend's words sounded somewhat logical. Earlier, he had just turned to look at his friend and accidentally caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing into the house. Hewitt then continued, "I think you just misidentified it. Maybe someone is doing something shady there. They accidentally saw us, so they ran away. Let's go check quickly." "It could be a thief. If anything is stolen from the house, we'll be in big trouble, you know." Hearing Tan's words, he hesitated for a moment longer, then agreed. The two brushed aside their fear and cautiously walked towards the house. Tan had said he saw a figure that looked like their young master. The two tiptoed, taking each step carefully to avoid being heard by anyone. Their breaths were slow, hearts thumping, eyes wide, staring forward with intense focus. Hewitt, leading the way, pressed himself against the wall and peered around. Hewitt's breathing stopped. His mind was highly concentrated, ready for someone to suddenly rush out and grab him. Hewitt peered for a moment around the side of the house. There was no one there. His face relaxed slightly, then he whispered to Tan, "It's all right, there's no one here." Hewitt exhaled because at that moment, the area was filled with valuable plants, and earlier, the group of planters had been very aggressive, not hesitating to resist anyone if discovered, even killing the homeowner to escape. That's why even Hewitt and Tan, though strong, had to be cautious of them. Because they were desperate, having nothing to lose, their blood was thicker than their wits. They felt relieved that no one was there. But to be extra sure, Hewitt decided to take his friend and check around one more time, because both of them had been so scared earlier that they had lost their minds for a while. During that time, the intruder might have left. Hewitt carefully checked the eastern side of the house, saying, "There's no one here, but you go ahead and check to be sure." After saying this, Hewitt felt strange because Tan hadn't replied, as if he hadn't heard or wasn't even there anymore. As he was about to turn around to see where his friend was, Hewitt felt a sudden chill on his neck, as if someone's cold breath was constantly exhaling onto his neck and the top of his head. Moreover, Hewitt felt something heavy behind him. He dared not say anything, slowly turned his face, his eyes widening, completely revealing an expression of extreme terror, as if he had just seen something horrifying. Hewitt's face quickly turned ashen, his muscles began to twitch, his eyes widened in terror, mouth opening for a large scream, and then Hewitt fainted, collapsing onto the floor. Beside him, the figure of the young man quickly caught him and whispered, "Hewitt, what's wrong with you? Wake up. Are you trying to scare me?" The person who caught Hewitt was Tan, his face filled with worry for his friend, not a terrifying entity. Let me go back a moment, to the time when Tan was standing behind his friend, waiting. He also heard Hewitt say there was no one there, so he exhaled. But because he was so scared, he didn't answer. A few seconds later, hearing his friend suggest they check around, he whispered his agreement. But just as Hewitt turned around, he looked at Tan with fearful eyes, his mouth wide open, then widened further, letting out a scream before passing out, making Tan panic and rush to catch his friend. Since Hewitt was already unconscious, Tan didn't dare to call out to anyone, as it was the middle of the night and he didn't want to alarm everyone, and also because he didn't know how to explain this situation. He decided to carry Hewitt back to his room by himself. Hewitt was strong, but Tan was not weak, so he could easily carry his friend. Back in the room, the other young man, who had been half asleep, woke up. "What now? Should I wake up the other guy and we can go back?" Tan shook his head. "Not yet, but this guy is unconscious. Do you have a way to wake him up?" The other young man was very surprised. By then, the remaining young man was also vaguely waking up, having heard the noise in the room. Saying Hewitt was unconscious, both were very surprised. Tan then briefly explained to the two. They looked at each other, confused, not understanding what was happening. What he recounted was scary, but they still didn't quite believe it. After a while, Hewitt woke up. Tan asked, "Are you okay? My goodness, you scared us so much. Why did you suddenly faint?" Hewitt, just waking up, suddenly sat upright. His eyes darted around, looking everywhere, his eyes filled with fear, which made the other two even more bewildered. His mouth stammered continuously. "No, no." Tan saw that his friend was unstable, so he turned and slapped his face to wake him up. "Hewitt, wake up. What's wrong?" After the stinging slap, Hewitt composed himself and became alert again. Where am I?" "You're in our room. Where else? Why did you suddenly scream like that?" Tan replied. Hewitt then recalled what had just happened and asked, "Where did you suddenly run off to earlier? You scared me so much." Tan shook his head, confused, and replied, "Where did I go? I was right behind you." Hewitt still stammered, "Damn you, where did you go? Tell me, what are you doing?" "Oh, why would I lie to you? I wasn't there. You must have fallen and hit your head." Hewitt felt all over his body and head. Indeed, there were no injuries from a fall. He knew he had just fainted, and he knew his friend was telling the truth that he hadn't gone anywhere. He looked at Tan and the other young man, stammering, I saw a ghost." Tan swallowed. The other two didn't understand why he suddenly mentioned seeing a ghost. "Damn it, what are you talking about, ghosts? Why are you suddenly saying something so eerie?" "I'm telling the truth, I'm not joking. Tan here also saw it." The other two turned to look at Tan. He nodded in confirmation, but he himself wasn't sure what he had seen and what had happened. Then the three men listened as Hewitt continued his story. "Earlier, Tan said there was someone on the side of the house, and I went out to check, just in case it was a thief that needed to be dealt with. Tan looked around and saw no one, but he was still worried that a stranger might have sneaked into the house, so I told Tan to check around. After I said that, I didn't hear him reply. Suddenly, I felt a cold chill behind my back. I turned around to look, and then I saw it." The two couldn't wait any longer and snapped, "What? Tell us quickly." "It was a ghost, a terrifying ghost. The young master was right behind me. I was so scared." The whole group was shaken to their core, no one among them unafraid. But Tan was more scared than the other two, because he had inadvertently followed Ruan's shadowy figure to the eastern side of Mrs. Lai's room. Hewitt continued in a trembling voice. "Oh my God, what I saw was even more terrifying than what Tan described, because he only saw the young master's figure disappear into the side of the house, but I saw him clearly. He stood right in front of me, eyes wide open, blood oozing from his eye sockets, blood from both nostrils and his mouth, his face covered in wounds, all blood. He was wearing the same clothes as the day he crawled back here." Tan became even more frightened because this was similar to what he had seen earlier. However, the other two still didn't quite believe it. One of them said, "It sounds scary, but I still don't quite believe it. What is it? You too must have been so scared that you imagine things." Tan immediately interrupted, "Then don't you remember what happened with the mistress? The simple fact that all four of us had to exert all our strength to hold her back. Just that alone made me shiver." The other one didn't know what to say and could only remain silent. Then, Tan and Hewitt looked at each other, not noticing the other young man whose face had turned pale for some unknown reason. Tan now looked at his friend's face and asked, "How? What's wrong with you? What are you doing with such a pale face?" The other two turned to look at Hao. Hao's face was completely white with fear, then he trembled and pointed his hand towards the window. The window there." The whole group was startled and looked towards the window on the eastern side of the house. It had been opened wide sometime. Hao then explained, "It was cold earlier, so I closed the window, and when you two came back and woke up, the window was still closed." Everyone heard this and understood Hao's meaning. They shivered, their faces filled with extreme terror. Without a word, the young men felt something incredibly horrifying approaching. It was coming very, very close, bringing with it a terror from the deepest pits of hell. The four young men stared intently at the window. Even the remaining young man, who hadn't believed it, now had to believe, for he himself felt a chilling coldness approaching the room. The frightened young men froze, waiting. They didn't have to wait long. Outside, rustling footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, eerie and silent. Inside the room, the four young men said nothing to each other, only frozen. Their hearts pounded loudly in their chests, their faces turning ashen with fear. The footsteps came closer and closer to the window, and then a voice, full of resentment, entered their ears. "Why did you do that? Why did you do that?" It hissed, making all four huddle in a corner, staring intently at the window. They still heard the angry, complaining words of the resentful spirit outside. By the window, the dim darkness gently seeped inside, filled with a biting chill. The footsteps grew closer and closer to the window, and then a blurry figure appeared right there. Needless to say, the four men in the room were so scared they wet their pants, unable to control themselves. Their mouths stammered, unable to scream, as they saw the ghost standing before the window. The young man's ghostly voice, full of resentment, echoed from soft to furious. "Why did you do that? Why did you do that?" One of the men inside could no longer bear it, stammering a plea. "Young master, please spare us. We didn't know anything. Young master, please spare us." The man next to him covered his mouth to stop him, but he still tried to speak, as if wanting to beg. Outside the window, the shadowy figure was none other than Ruan, the Lai family's only son, who had recently died. Now he appeared as a pale, shimmering shadow, but that alone was enough to make the four inside turn completely white with fear. They saw him standing there, his face starting to turn green, looking inside, followed by terrifying words. "Come out, or I will kill you." All of them immediately prostrated themselves on the floor, repeatedly bowing to Ruan's ghost. Their voices were tearful, begging, "Young master, please spare us. We were wrong." A sound came from Ruan's ghost. A terrifying, echoing laugh that pierced deep into the souls of the four young men, the last heirs of the Lai family. Tan looked up to bow a few more times when he inadvertently saw the young master's ghost glaring at him, then disappearing into the night. It was only when they calmed down that Huet, his voice trembling, asked, "What do we do now, guys? What should we do? Tomorrow, we'll tell the master to pay us our wages, and we'll get out of here." "I'm so scared. If we stay any longer, we'll either die of a heart attack or the young master will kill us." The other men agreed, and as planned, early the next morning, the four men went to Mr. Lai to ask for their wages and to quit. Mr. Lai was very surprised by this, but they insisted on leaving, so he agreed and didn't force them. After paying the four men their wages, he didn't forget to give them a little extra, looking at them with a threatening gaze. The four understood his meaning and immediately said, "Rest assured, master, we understand. You can leave whenever you need to, and if you ever want to come back, I'll still take you in. It's no problem. Just." When Mr. Lai got to this point, the group nodded their thanks, not needing to hear the rest of the sentence, and immediately left the Lai family's house, going who knows where. Mr. Lai felt a pang of sadness, but in his heart, a glimmer of hope remained, a hope that allowed him to compose himself on this day. He thought to himself, "Tomorrow, just tomorrow, this family will still have hope. I must persevere." He left the room and went somewhere alone, not allowing anyone to follow, his footsteps resolute. In another place, it was now dusk. The shadow of a young man wandered dispiritedly along a path, not forgetting to ask acquaintances he met about their whereabouts. That young man was Huet. After leaving Mr. Lai's house, the four men also prepared to leave the village, each going their separate ways, as everyone had their own plans. It wasn't until dusk that Huet returned to the place he used to live before Mr. Lai took him in. Huet now intended to return to his old house at the end of the village, walking in a daze, his eyes wide as if his soul had fled, trembling periodically. He still couldn't forget what he had seen last night. It was too terrifying. He had not just once, but twice, seen Ruan's ghost appear to scare them. One of those times, it was clearly right beside him. Reflecting on what he had done, Huet understood that Ruan had appeared to scare him and the other three men. This fear caused Huet, even though he had already left that place, to tremble ceaselessly. In his mind, he constantly felt someone following him and staring intently at him. His eyes darted around, looking for anyone suspicious, but there was no one. Not seeing anyone, he grew even more afraid, thinking Ruan's shadow was still following him. Suddenly, as he walked, a bony, dry hand grabbed his arm, startling him, and he turned his head to one side. "Who's there?" In front of Huet was an old man, seemingly a beggar from this village. He hadn't seen such a poorly dressed, gaunt, hollow-eyed old man during his time there. However, since it was a person, he felt somewhat less afraid, so he lowered his voice and asked, "Who are you? Why are you pulling me?" The old man looked at Hewitt without saying anything. He stared intently from head to toe with one eye, or, more accurately, only one eye, as the other side was cloudy, perhaps blind. Hewitt now pulled his hand away and asked, "Did you hear what I asked?" The old man then looked into Hewitt's eyes and solemnly said, "Young man, I'm going to tell you something. If it's true, don't deny it to my face. Just say whatever you want to say, old man, but don't be vague. You're being followed by a spirit, aren't you? The spirit of a young man who died a few days ago." As soon as Hewitt heard the question, he was so shocked that he couldn't control his shivering, trembling 3 times. He stammered, unable to speak. The old man smiled faintly, a meaningful, knowing smile. "You are haunted by a spirit, but its malevolence towards you is not yet too severe. Perhaps you did not intentionally create bad karma with this person. How do you know? I haven't said anything yet. Because I see the vengeful spirit following you, and it seems to be following many people. I'm just asking to make you trust me." In just 5 seconds, Hewitt completely trusted the old man. This was because he had just returned to the village and hadn't uttered a word to anyone. Moreover, this was the first time they had met, and the old man already knew what he was going through. Normally, if someone told him he was being followed by a spirit, Hewitt would surely get angry and think he was being targeted by shamans trying to extort money. But this time, it was different. The old man's description perfectly matched the ghost of the Lai family's young master, who had appeared last night to scare the 4 of them. Hewitt suddenly grabbed the old man's hand and said, "Old man, please help me. You're a shaman, aren't you?" "A shaman? I dare not claim to be, but I do know a little and can help you and the spirit. However, you must tell me what you have done." Yes, I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you everything. Please help me, old man." Hewitt led the old man back to his old house. Only then did he truly realize that Ruan's spirit had been following him. That was why he constantly felt someone following him on the way back. However, according to the old man, the young master's ghost was following them not to harm Hewitt or the other 3, but to seek help. But at this moment, Ruan's spirit was gradually becoming weaker and weaker. Hearing this, Hewitt felt relieved and began to recount his story. Ruan was haunting him, as well as the others. "Actually, as you said, old man, we were not the ones who initiated this. We did it because the master of the house told us to. So what did you do?" Hewitt then told the story. After the young master's funeral, the master suddenly called the 3 of us into a private room. We were the strongest in the house, and it seemed we met some criteria that he wanted. Without asking, he told us that in the middle of that night, we had to go with him and a shaman he had invited to the young master's grave to handle the after-death matters for the young master, too. The old man raised an eyebrow. Hewitt hesitated for a moment longer, then said, "We had to go there, too, to dig up his grave. We were very scared and didn't want to because the young master's grave had just been covered, and we had to be careful not to be possessed by him and die. But partly because the master gave us a large sum of money to help and keep quiet, and partly because that shaman was renowned as very powerful and guaranteed that nothing would happen, we agreed. We were too poor, no one wanted to refuse that money. So after you dug it up, what else did you do?" the old man asked in a low voice. Hewitt continued, "Then we all stood aside. But we could still clearly see what the shaman was doing. He took out talismans and something else that we couldn't quite make out. He mumbled as if performing a spell. It took almost an hour before he finished, then he stuffed those things into the young master's mouth. After that, he told us to bury the body, to bury it directly without a coffin. The coffin, the master later told us to dispose of it." Hewitt paused for a breath, then continued, "Truly, we were so scared. We knew that shaman was powerful, but just last night the young master's spirit appeared, complaining to us. We're so scared, old man." The old man listened, then shook his head. "I understand now. Tomorrow, lead me to that house. I will put an end to this and also bring peace to the young master. It's fortunate that his ghost only wanted to scare you and use you to seek help, otherwise you would have been killed last night." Hewitt was stunned and immediately agreed. Tomorrow, he would lead the old man to the Lai family's house, but he still didn't know how to explain it to Mr. Lai. But if he stayed put and did nothing, who knew how many more times Ruan's spirit would appear to scare him? As planned, the next morning, Hewitt brought the old man with him to Mr. Lai's house. The journey was quite long, so they didn't arrive until late afternoon. At the Lai family's house in the late afternoon, it wasn't yet dinner time when Mr. Lai went into his wife's room and whispered, Wife, you're back to your senses, thank goodness. Do you know how worried I was? Mrs. Lai's face was now flushed with color. Perhaps she had come to terms with her son's death. In her memory, she recalled what happened last night when the young men helped her back to her room to rest. She had once again seen Ruan's spirit standing by the window. This time, Ruan didn't leave but stood there, desperately trying to remind his mother that he was dead. Only, he couldn't explain the cause of his death, nor could he explain why he appeared as a pitiful ghost in the middle of the night. By today, Mrs. Lai had calmed down, her face serene and composed as Mr. Lai spoke, suggesting, "Dear, we can still have a child, you know." Mrs. Lai was startled and asked, "What are you saying? Do you know what you're talking about?" "Calm down and listen to me, dear. I mean, we still have hope for a child. We just need to try one more time. You know what our family is like. So let's try to follow Master Moan's advice one more time. That's our family's only hope, dear." "But we're at this age, how can we have a child? What are you thinking?" "I know that people our age normally cannot have children, but Master Moan emphatically stated that if we try hard, we will have one." Hearing this, Mrs. Lai suddenly felt her heart soften. She was grieving her son, so her emotions were very fragile, and she seemed to want to follow her husband. And so, the couple decided to take a chance on their luck and prepare to do something embarrassing they hadn't touched in a long time. Mr. Lai reached out to untie his wife's trousers when suddenly there was a knock at the door. "Master and mistress, someone wants to see you. I'm here to inform you." Mr. Lai stopped, asking with a slightly annoyed tone, "What is it? Who's looking for me?" The person outside replied, "It's Huet and an old man." For a moment, Mr. Lai didn't understand why Huet had returned and with some old man. Could he have thought Mr. Lai was too kind and come here to seek something? He frowned and said, "All right, I'll go out. You go ahead." Then he looked at his wife and said, "Never mind, I'll deal with it." Mrs. Lai's face turned red. She thought if others knew what the old couple were about to do, they might die of shame. If they truly had a child, it would be one thing, but if not, and people in the village knew about their intimate matter, surely people would laugh at them. Mr. Lai went out and saw Huet and an old man waiting. He asked, "Why are you back here, Huet?" "What do you want, and who is this?" Huet stammered, unsure how to explain. The old man suddenly looked at Mr. Lai, then unexpectedly lunged forward, pushing him and immediately snatching the necklace Mr. Lai was wearing. Mr. Lai, taken by surprise, immediately cursed, "Hey, old man, what are you doing?" The old man paid no attention to Mr. Lai's words, only asking, "How long have you been wearing this?" "Why do you ask? What does it have to do with you?" Mr. Lai then turned to Huet. "Huet, who is this man? What are you trying to do?" Huet still didn't know what to say. The old man then interrupted, "Tell me, or this whole family will die. No, not just you two." Mr. Lai was startled to hear this, but still cursed, "Old man, who are you? How dare you come here and talk nonsense? Huet, throw them out." The servants immediately stepped forward. Huet quickly said, "Stop, don't curse like that." Huet explained, trembling, "He knows everything, that's why I told him everything. But the young master is angry with us. If we don't hurry, he'll kill us." Mr. Lai, upon hearing Huet's story, was shaken. He then turned to the old man, whimpering, "Old man, are you a shaman from somewhere? What is this all about?" The old man sighed and said, "I'm only sad because you, master, were manipulated by that shaman. The grave without a coffin, buried directly, and even with talismans inserted. I fear there's nothing left of the body. But why did you agree to do such a thing? Tell me." Mr. Lai invited the old man inside to explain. Then he said, "Truly, our family is suffering greatly. The young man was our only child and he died. That's why we listened to that old shaman. Because he had helped our family for many years, I trusted him and followed his instructions. He said that if we just did that, whatever we wished for would come true. And all we've wanted is a son to continue our family line." The old man shook his head once more. "Bearing children naturally should follow the laws of nature. Children are a gift from heaven. How can you, at your advanced age, possibly have another child?" He exhaled, then continued. "That shaman, knowing your family's trust, exploited it for dark and malicious purposes. There is no such thing in this world as wishing for a child by torturing the body of the deceased. I tell you, if your wife were indeed to become pregnant, the child born would only be a malevolent spirit or a demon, not a human. The shaman also uses it to harm people and increase his own power." Mr. Lai and all the servants who heard this were terrified out of their wits. Their souls seemed to fly out of their bodies. Mr. Lai stammered, "But what did that shaman gain by exploiting us? Every time he performed a ritual, we paid him generously. Why would he do such a thing?" The old man replied gravely, "I already told you. His goal is not money, but power, the power of evil spirits. However, fortunately for your family, that old shaman only partially learned that type of dark magic. It was also his first attempt, so it was very weak. That's why the young master's spirit was able to escape the torture and appear to seek help. It could be said that you yourself tortured your son, even though he was already dead. There's also another matter. His death was self-inflicted, no one murdered him. Perhaps in a drunken stupor, he fell somewhere, sustaining severe injuries that led to his death. Mr. Lai was now utterly shocked, unable to believe that the person he trusted had played such a trick. Fortunately, things hadn't gone too far. The old man then said, "Quickly, take me there. If that dark magic completely consumes your son's body, you will all die." Mr. Lai nodded frantically, immediately calling out strong servants to dig up the grave. The moment the grave was unearthed, they saw Ruan's body lying there, dismembered. The corpse was torn apart by something, its bones crushed. It had only been buried for a few days, and the stench of decay was already overwhelming. More terrifying, the coffin where the young man's body was supposed to be was completely absent. Only the mangled corpse lay on the ground, with just the upper chest and head remaining. Nothing was left below. The old man saw that everyone had finished, then immediately jumped down. No one knew what he was doing, but dust swirled everywhere. A foul, suffocating odor filled their noses. Somewhere amidst the sounds of the wind, there was also the faint sound of a young man screaming in agony. They stood there, watching as the wind blew, and in the blurry haze, they could still faintly see Ruan's figure struggling in agony before vanishing. When everything calmed down at the grave, everyone was still utterly terrified. Mrs. Lai, from the moment she saw her son's mangled body below, fainted on the spot, knowing nothing more. The old man, having finished, pried open the corpse's mouth and took out a talisman and a braided lock of hair. He then tore it apart, told the men to pull him up and said, "It's done. Bury it quickly. There's no need for a coffin anymore. Everything is over." The 8 servants quickly refilled the grave, shoveling dirt with trembling hands at what had just happened. Returning home, Mr. Lai immediately offered payment, but the old man refused. "Money doesn't always solve problems. I'll take my leave." Mr. Lai dared not force the shaman but hesitated. "But that matter. Can you help our family with it?" The old man stopped, then whispered, "Your family's fate is not yet exhausted, but you need to change many things to hope for good karma." After saying this, he nodded to Hewitt, who then left. Hewitt also left the bonus money Mr. Lai had given him earlier, not taking any of his wages from his time working there. The couple didn't quite understand the old man's words at first, but from then on, they changed their ways. Not only did they stop harming others' livelihoods, but they also wholeheartedly offered help. They no longer displeased the villagers, and everyone in the village began to love and visit them frequently, bringing them rustic gifts from their gardens and farms. The couple, at that time, could finally feel lighthearted, smiling and chatting with everyone. The couple tried their best to live a good life, partly wanting inner peace, and partly waiting for something that the old man had mentioned years ago before leaving. And so, life continued day by day, until one late afternoon at the Lai family's house, there was a knock at the gate. The servant quickly went to open the door to welcome guests. Then, someone ran to the couple's room and said, "Master and mistress, someone is here to see you." Mr. Lai asked who it was, and the servant replied, "It's a young woman and a child." Still not quite understanding, the couple went to the gate together to see what was happening. When they arrived, they saw a young woman about Ruan's age if he were alive, along with a child of about 3 or 4 years old. Seeing the little boy's face, the couple exchanged a quick glance, realizing something. The young woman then said, "Hello, sir, hello, ma'am." Then she urged the boy to greet the couple. The boy politely greeted the couple. The couple still didn't quite understand what was happening. The young woman hesitated, her voice somewhat shy. "Actually, I'm here because this child is Ruan's son." The couple might not believe it, but upon hearing this, they were overwhelmed with emotion, tears immediately flowing as they bent down and embraced the child. The couple didn't need her to explain further because just by hearing a brief introduction, they recognized every feature on the child's face that resembled their son when he was alive. My grandson? My grandson?" Mrs. Lai hugged the child tightly, kissing his face, her voice choked with emotion, tears streaming down and wetting the boy's face. Mr. Lai was deeply moved, unable to control himself. He looked at the young woman and said, "My daughter-in-law, come into the house. You don't need to explain. Your parents-in-law believe this is his child and our grandson. Come in and rest, my dear." The young woman couldn't help but cry. On the way here, she had always been worried that the couple would think she was trying to take advantage of them or cause trouble. But it was only last night, after Ruan's spirit appeared in her dream and encouraged her, that she had the courage to come here. When the couple asked her story, they learned that years ago, while Ruan was out carousing, he accidentally met her. Her name was Enhai, and she lived in a village quite far away. At that time, no one would have thought they would become acquainted. She knew Ruan was a notorious playboy, but Enhai felt that he was completely sincere with her and agreed to be with him. Indeed, from the moment he met Enhai, he gradually changed his ways, but neither his family nor the villagers had noticed it yet. They still thought Ruan was always out and not coming home. But at that time, he wasn't out playing with friends, he was visiting Enhai's house, and because it was so far, a single trip would take several days to return. Ruan genuinely cared for her, and his wild nature changed, and what was meant to be happened. Enhai agreed to give herself to him, completely trusting Ruan and their future, until she announced to him that she was pregnant. It must be said that both were overjoyed. Ruan was so happy he didn't know what to think. He told Enhai to return and inform her parents. It was already late evening when he left, and no matter how much his beloved tried to stop him, she couldn't prevent him from returning. That very night on his way back, Ruan was so overjoyed that he lost focus. His foot slipped down a mountain path, and it wasn't until midnight that he managed to crawl back, his body covered in blood and severely injured. Ruan still struggled to crawl home to inform his parents, but before he could speak, he took his last breath. Mrs. Lai held Enhai's hand and asked, "Then why didn't you bring the child here to visit your grandparents for all these years? We've been so desolate." Enhai replied, "He passed away so suddenly, it left me bewildered and unsure what to think. I only dared to stand from afar during the funeral. I was afraid that if I brought the child, you too wouldn't believe me and would be angry. That's why I didn't dare to come all these years." Then she recounted how Ruan's spirit had appeared in her dream, which finally gave her the courage to come. Fortunately, Mr. and Mrs. Lai both accepted. "Oh, my dear. You must call us mother and father if you wish." The servants, hearing the story, were also moved to tears. They couldn't have imagined things would turn out this way. The couple and their grandson were reunited. The two didn't pressure Enhai, saying, "Thank you for telling us about the young man. Since he is gone, and the child hasn't been officially married into the family yet, you can still call us mother and father. In the future, if you wish to marry someone else, you don't need to worry, but we consider you family." Enhai nodded. "Yes, mother and father." The couple shed tears hearing Enhai say this. She also decided to stay single, not to love or marry anyone. She and the couple raised the boy, and she single-handedly took on the couple's work as they grew older. Enhai and Ruan's son grew up to be exceptionally brilliant, intelligent, well-behaved, and resembled his father in every aspect, as if cast from the same mold. Mrs. Lai joyfully stood before her son's altar and said, "Rest in peace, my son. Your parents and your wife are living well, and your wife and child are doing well." After saying this, she cried tears of happiness in her old age. Mr. Lai came from behind, supported her, and both returned to their room. On the altar, no one saw the few incense sticks swaying, as if responding to Mrs. Lai's heartfelt prayer.